Shema Israel, Yahweh Yahweh Kad, V'yavtelet Yahweh, V'kol Aveklu, Kol Shaku, Kol Mawadeka. Hear Israel, Yahweh is your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh, Elohim with thy heart, with thy being, with thy strength.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Woo! Just the summer. Yes, because you can be proud. Yes. All right, everybody. Chag Sameach again. Chag Sameach. Oh, I'm sorry. I just knocked that leaf down. The leaves are falling. Okay, turn to Leviticus 23 again. We can't go over this too many times, I don't think. I remember, my first Feast of Sukkot, Squaw Valley, California. And if you think it's bad with the rain we've had, by the way, for those of you on the video and those of you on Skype, we've had in 2 days 6.5+ inches of rain. 6.5 inches. And we've had one road closure in Milton that we know of. The one between Milton and Baghdad was closed yesterday. So we've had rain, yep. But in 1966, before most of you were born, at least everybody on this side, and maybe the person in the back there, I don't know how old she is. We didn't have rain, we had snow at the Feast of Tabernacles. And we were in, how many of you ever saw anything about the Winter Olympics in Squaw Valley, California? Only the older people. Do you remember that big pavilion where they had the ice hockey and everything and how it was open on one end? That's where we had the Feast of Tabernacles, with the snow in the open arena. And I was from Minnesota, and this is why I never forgot it, because my roommate was the guy I was in the chalet with. He was from Minnesota, but he liked it cold. And so we slept with the window open. I'd been gone from Minnesota too long, I guess, because I froze, just about everything. Anyway, that was a very memorable. Can you all remember your first Feast of Tabernacles? It wasn't quite as dramatic as that, though, was it? But we've had a lot of drama. Okay, Leviticus 23. Hard to believe that was 50 years ago. It doesn't seem like that long ago. And I was in Squaw Valley about 2 years later. The next year after that, I was in Long Beach, California. I don't remember that one so well, except that I went to Catalina Island. But then the year after that, I was back in Squaw Valley, and guess what? It snowed, and we almost didn't get back to the college because it snowed so much at the end of the feast that they were closing the roads. We thought we were going to be taking classes in Squaw Valley. That was in 1968, I guess. 66 was my first one, 66. Yeah, but I meant 68. Okay, Leviticus 23, 39. 39. On the 15th day of the 7th month, when you gather in the fruit of the land, observe the festival of Yahweh for 7 days. On the first day is a rest, and on the 8th day is a rest. Now, what we mean as a rest in the English language may not be quite what Yahweh means by a rest, because look at what it says. And you shall take for yourselves on the first day, that's today, the fruit of tove trees, branches of palm trees, twigs of leafy trees, and willows of the stream, and shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim for 7 days. And you notice it doesn't say unless it rains, or unless it snows, or unless anything. He says on the first day you take these branches and you form a sukkah. We should have had services this morning, and we should be out there doing our sukkah this morning, because this morning we had at least 2 inches of that 3.5 inches of rain just this morning. And in between those raindrops and those rain showers, we did what this scripture said. We cut the palm branches, we cut the oak branches, we cut some willow twigs, and we strung up something to hold it up, and we put it up. We made the sukkah this morning in 2 inches, maybe 2.5 inches of rain showers. That is not my idea of rest. But guess what? That is Yahweh's idea of rest. Now, he doesn't want you going to your job and working. You know, he wouldn't want us to go out here and cut trees for a fire tonight, but when he tells you to do that, it's kind of like the Day of Atonement, isn't it? Remember when we read that? Brian read that on the Day of Atonement, and you had to take these 2 goats. You guys have killed the goat. It's a good thing that's not a Sabbath, right? For us, because we're not Levites. But on the Day of Atonement, the most solemn, the most restful day of the year for almost everybody, they had to kill all those. They didn't just kill those 2 goats. They killed all those animals for sacrifices that were offered that day. You can read it in Numbers chapter 28 or 29. So, and guess what? What we did today is the small part of what was commanded, because you can go to Leviticus or Numbers 28 and 29 and read the sacrifices for the Feast of Tabernacles. And he didn't say except on the high days, the days of rest. So that's a lot of work. But you see, as far as Yahweh's word work, it's not work. It's what he commands you to do. So when we all did that today and contributed, did everybody do that? Jay, you didn't put your twig up there yet, have you? After services, you got to go out there and put your twig up. All right? Because I think everybody else has. Right? We all pitched in and made somewhat of a sukkah. I would not want to have to stay under that sukkah tonight. But anyway, it's out there. We did it. And we'll take a picture. We'll send it to you out there, or give a picture to Sally and she can bring it back to you. So just remember that. When we read about rest on Shabbat, and we read about rest, and we read about no work, our Western idea is not necessarily what Yahweh has in mind. Now, Yahweh doesn't want us to go to work and get paid. He doesn't want us to go out and cut our grass. But there are things that he tells us to do. When we are doing what Yahweh tells us to do, we are not working. Right? We're resting, like I was doing last night during the film. Okay. So that, and you observe it as a festival to Yahweh 7 days in the year, a law forever, observe it in the 7th month, dwell in booths, some kind of a temporary dwelling. And in a way, you know, we live, some of us more than others. I don't know how you think about your house, but it's hard for me to think of my house as a permanent house. You know what I mean? I have a kitchen, but I share that kitchen with y'all on the Sabbath and, you know, during the feast. And I don't have a living room, but I have a place where I sleep. But anyway, to me, I'm sojourning. I'm sojourning for Yahweh. You're sojourning? Well, that's because you sojourn so much. That was Murdy. She's saying, I'm sojourning. And we're supposed to be sojourning. So anyway, it's temporary. Some kind of, you dwell in booths. It's not your permanent home. So that you know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them, and that Hebrew word is Sukkot. And we know that they did not dwell in branch-covered huts. When they came out of Egypt, when they traveled that 40 years in the wilderness, they dwelt in tents. So a tent can be a sukkah. A tent can be, lots of things can be a sukkah. A travel trailer can be a sukkah. A room wherever you travel to, like some of you did, where your home's back in New York or in Tampa or Northport, Florida, or Niceville or Navarre. And so, you know, there are a lot of different things that you could use for a temporary dwelling, because Israel did not build these little sukkahs. You know what the original intent of the sukkah, the original sukkahs were for? Who knows? Did I mention that Sabbath? Oh, I did. For cattle. And so where was Yahshua born? You know, we have in our English language, we say, away in the manger. Well, if there was a manger there, it was because it was in a sukkah. And it was really intended originally for cattle, and they were staying in it because they were visiting in Israel, and there was no room for them in the inn. So Yahweh caused Yahshua to be born in a sukkah. It would not, during Sukkot. Exactly. Exactly. I don't know if I have that scripture in here or not. We'll see. So anyway, lots of different, a lot of different ideas that Yahweh has that sometimes we form opinions about that are really not, not true. And so, when I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim, and today it looks like Mitzrayim was here, thus did Moshe speak at the appointed times, or about the appointed times of Yahweh to the children of Israel. So that you know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths, or Sukkot, when I brought them out of Mitzrayim. So where are we dwelling now? Outside of the feast, the festival of Yahweh. Where are you dwelling? If you're back in Schenectady, New York, or in Northport, Florida, or in Riverview, Florida, or in Navarre, or wherever you are, even if you're here in Milton, where are you dwelling? Where are you dwelling? Who rules? Well, the answer is we're in Egypt. We are in Mitzrayim, because we're sojourning. Even when we're not here at this feast, rehearsing what our lives are all about. Who rules when we are in Egypt? Whose laws are we supposed to be following? Well, I know all of us would say, well, our desire is to follow Yahweh's laws, but there are some of Yahweh's laws that really are superseded by man's laws. Like stoning. We can't, we couldn't get away with stoning, could we? So when it comes to that part of Torah, we have to live under the laws of the Mitzrayim that we live in. When Yahweh brought Israel out, he was the ruler who stipulated his laws, wasn't he? Isn't that what he did on Mount Sion? Or Mount Sinai? Mount Sinai. Get the right mountain in here. Mount Sinai. Isn't that what he did? He stipulated his laws to them. And the children of Israel decided that they didn't want to hear from Yahweh directly and asked to have a man, Moshe, to be a go-between. But Moshe, to his credit, did not rule according to his whim and desire, did he? And, sometimes they didn't like that even, because they didn't like Yahweh's laws, and they didn't like, they rebelled against Yahweh's person that he put between as the go-between. And so we have Miriam and Aaron's rebellion and Korah's rebellion and so forth. Let's turn to Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah chapter 2. Beginning in verse 12. Jeremiah 2, and beginning in verse 12. Read a section here. Be amazed, O heavens, at this, and be frightened. Be utterly dried up, declares Yahweh. For my people have done two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, to hew out for them cisterns, cracked cisterns, which do not hold water. So, Israel really did that twice, didn't they? Once in the incidents that I'm mentioning, and when was the other time? When they asked for a king. When they asked for a king, they were rejecting Yahweh. And that's what Yahweh told Samuel. They haven't rejected you. They've rejected me, that I should not rule over them. So and whenever you get a man in place of Yahweh, you got a cracked cistern. Or would that be a cracked brethren? We might end up with a cracked cistern, right? We don't know. Anyway, is Israel a servant? Was he born in the house? Why is he given to plunder? And of course, what is the answer to that? No, he's not a servant. Yes, he was born in the house. Israel, my firstborn son. Ephraim, my firstborn son, because he's called by Ephraim now. The young lions in verse 15 roared at him. They growled and made his land waste. His cities have been burned without inhabitant. And this is a history. And actually, it's by the prophet Jeremiah. So this all didn't happen before. This is not really history when he's writing. It's prophecy. And it's been happening ever since. Even the sons of Noph and of Tachphanes have shaven the crown of your head. Have you not done this to yourself by forsaking Yahweh your Elohim when he led you by the way? Forsaking Yahweh. Rejecting Yahweh when he was the ruler, and got for yourself cracked cisterns. And now, why take the way to Mitzrayim to drink the waters of Sechor? Or why take the way to Asher to drink the waters of the river? Your own evil instructs you, and your backslidings reprove you. Know therefore and see that it is evil and bitter that you have forsaken Yahweh your Elohim, and that my fear is not in you, declares the Master Yahweh Sabaoth. For of old you have broken your yoke and tore of your bonds, and you said, I am not serving you, when on every high hill and under every green tree you lay down a whore. Yet I had planted you a choice vine, all of it a true seed. How then have you turned before me into the degenerate plant of a strange vine? Although you wash yourselves with lye and use much soap, yet your crookedness is ingrained before me, declares the Master Yahweh. How do you say, I am not defiled? I have not gone after the Baals. See your way in the valley? Know what you have done. A swift dromedary breaking loose in her ways. A wild donkey used to the wilderness, sniffing the wind in the desire of her being. Those of you who are adults who have been around when the donkeys are sniffing each other and turning up their lip, there it is. There's the exact picture. In her time of mating, who turns her away? Who turns her away? All those who seek her need not weary themselves. In her month they find her. Keep your foot from being bare and your throat from thirst. But you said, it is useless, because I love strangers, and after them I go. As the thief is ashamed when he is found out, so is the house of Israel ashamed. They should be. They and their sovereigns and their heads and their priests and their prophets, saying to a tree, you are my father. To a stone, you gave birth to me. For they have turned their back to me and not their face. But in time of their calamity they say, arise, Yahweh, and save us. But where are your mighty ones that you have made for yourselves? Let them arise and see if they save you in the time of your calamity. Because your mighty ones have become as many as your cities, O Yehudah. Why do you complain to me? You all have transgressed against me, declares Yahweh. In vain I have smitten your children. They receive no instruction. Your sword has devoured your prophets like a destroying lion. O generation, see the word of Yahweh. Have I been a witness or a wilderness to Israel, or a land of darkness? Why do my people say, we have broken loose? We come to you no more. Isn't that what Christianity really says? Because they have their own. They don't have Yahweh, they have God. They don't have Yahshua, they have Jesus. Would a maiden forget her ornaments, or a bride her headband? Yet my people have forgotten me days without number. Why do you embellish your way to seek love? Therefore you have even taught the evil women your ways. Even on your skirts is found the blood of the lives of the poor innocents. You did not find them breaking in, but in spite of all these, you say, because I am innocent, certainly his displeasure shall turn from me. So, every once in a while when we have a national calamity, some congressman will say, like they did back at 911, everybody should pray to God. We should seek God. See, I shall bring judgment on you, because you say I have not sinned. Why do you go about so much to change? Why do you go about so much to change your way? Even of Mitzrayim you are ashamed, as you were ashamed of Asher. Even from this one you shall go forth with your hands on your head, for Yahweh has rejected those you trust, and you shall not prosper by them. So this is the reason. This is the reason for the gospel, because this is the history of Israel as foretold by the prophet Jeremiah. Isaiah chapter 5. So this is the reason why, and this is what precedes what we are here this week to rehearse. It is the judgment of Yahweh. And the judgment of Yahweh is for the behavior of Israel. Isaiah 5. We read some of these scriptures when we get to chapter 11, but I want to show you this judgment, that this judgment is in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah is about the coming kingdom of the Messiah. That's what this whole book is about, this whole prophecy. Verse 13, Isaiah chapter 5 and verse 13. Therefore, my people have gone into exile because they have no knowledge. Well, do they have, is that the way it is? No knowledge, or it's because they don't want to have knowledge? They don't have the right knowledge. They don't, the difference between, having and obeying or believing. And their esteemed men are starved, and their crowd dried up with thirst. Well, who are our esteemed men? Who are we looking forward to? I mean, we got as a nation, we have an election next year, and we're just so excited. Because there are, the esteemed men are so many. Pitiful, pitiful, pitiful. Isaiah chapter 11. Are our esteemed men starved? Afraid so. Isaiah 11, beginning in verse 1, and we read this just a few days ago. A rod shall come forth, and this is what we're here to rehearse. But we're going to see after we read this and what is coming, what precedes it, what comes ahead of it. A rod shall come forth from the stump of Yishai, and a sprout from his roots shall bear fruit. The Spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of Yahweh. And of course, Yeshua, is talking about Yeshua, but it's not just talking about his first coming, it's talking about his second coming as well. And it shall make him breathe in the fear of Yahweh. He shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness he shall judge. Did we catch that word before? So we're talking about judgment. He shall judge the poor, and shall decide with straightness for the meek ones of the earth, and shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and slay the wrong. Well, you have to have judgment to determine who the wrong are, with the breath of his lips. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, trustworthiness the girdle of his waist. A wolf shall dwell with the lamb. And this is the picture of everybody who understands anything about the Feast of Sukkot or the Feast of Tabernacles uses the image of a lamb with a lion. Well, the scripture doesn't really say a lamb with a lion. It says a lamb with a wolf. So I think we should make a new one, Take a picture of wolf lying down with the lamb. But they have it. Worldwide had it. We had it. It was the emblem of Ambassador College, actually. So a wolf shall dwell with the lamb. A lion or a leopard shall lie down with the young goat. That would be a good image. And the calf and the young lion, and the fatling together, and a little child leads them. And cow and nursing child shall play and cow and bear shall feed, and their young ones lie down together, and a lion eats straw like an ox. And the nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the adder's den. They do no evil nor destroy in all my kadosh mountain, my set-apart mountain, for the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of Yahweh. Remember, it said in Isaiah 5 and verse 3, they have no knowledge. But then the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. We got a song about that. Not today, but we'll be singing that during the feast. And in that day there shall be a root of Yeshai standing as a banner to the people. Unto him the nations shall seek, and his rest shall be esteemed. And it shall be in that day that Yahweh sets his hand again, the second time, to recover the remnant of his people who are left, from Asher, from Mitzrayim, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the isles of the sea. And he shall raise a banner of the nations, and gather the outcasts of Israel, and assemble the dispersed of Yehudah from the four corners of the earth. And the envy of Ephraim shall turn aside, and the adversaries of Yehudah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Yehudah, and Yehudah not trouble Ephraim. But they shall fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines toward the west. Together they plunder the people of the east, and their hands stretching forth on Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall be subject to them. And Yahweh shall put under the band the tongue of the sea of Mitzrayim, and he shall wave his hand over the river with the might of his spirit, and shall smite it in the seven streams, and shall cause men to tread in it in sandals. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, those left from Ashur, as it was for Israel in the days when he came from the land of Mitzrayim. Now, notice this judgment from Yahweh. We're going to see this now. In verse 12, or verse 1 of chapter 12. Actually, we're going to read the whole chapter because it's only 6 verses. Isaiah 12, 1 to 6. In that day you shall say, I thank you, Yahweh. Though you were enraged with me, your displeasure has turned back, and you have comforted me. And see, El is my deliverance. I trust and am not afraid. Is that familiar? There's one of James Block's songs right there. I trust and I am not afraid. Yahweh is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation or deliverance. And you shall draw water with joy from the fountain of deliverance, and in that day you shall say, Praise Yahweh, call upon his name, make known his deeds among the peoples, make mention that his name is exalted. Sing to Yahweh, for he has done excellency. This is known in all the earth. Cry aloud and shout, O inhabitant of Zion, for great is the Kodesh of Israel, the set-apart one in your midst. Did you notice that Yahweh listed people whom he had used to distress Israel? Did you notice that? It was back in, let's see, where was that? We just read several of those. Now my eye is not following them. But anyway, here they are. I mean, these were in the verse we just read. In chapter 11. Yeah. In chapter 11. It was back in chapter 11. Yeah, in verses, from about verse 13. just after verse 13. Here they are. Here's a list of them. These were in chapter 11. Asher, Mitzrayim, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, and Hamath. Those were the nations that were there. Now, beginning in chapter 13, Isaiah gives Yahweh's judgment on these and some other nations. Now, we're just going to read the first verse. We're not going to look at what the judgment is, but they're all Yahweh's judgments. And it says in chapter 13, Isaiah, we might have to turn there. Chapter 13 and verse 1. The message concerning Babel, Babylon, which Yeshayahu, son of Amat, saw. And there's the judgment of Babel. Chapter 14, and notice in chapter 14, verse 1, where we are, and then when we go on from here, the first verse of several chapters coming, it will show the judgment that Isaiah is pronouncing from Yahweh on these peoples that we just read about. Because Yahweh has compassion on Yaakov. So this is when Yahweh has compassion on Israel, on Yaakov, and shall again choose Israel, and give them rest in their own land, and the strangers shall join them, and they shall cling to the house of Yaakov. And peoples shall take them and bring them to their own place, their own land. And let's see, I'm reading in the book, and I've got it in the notes too. And the house of Israel shall possess them for servants and female servants in the land of Yahweh. And they shall make captives of their captives and rule over their oppressors. And it shall be in that day, in the day that Yahweh gives you rest from your sorrow and from your trouble in the hard service in which you were made to serve, that you shall take up this proverb against the sovereign of Babel and say, how the oppressor has ceased, the gold gatherer ceased. Yahweh has broken the staff of the wrong, the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with ceaseless blows, he who ruled the nations in displeasure is persecuted, and no one retains. All the earth is at rest, at peace. They shall break forth into singing. This is this time. This is this time. But notice he pronounced the judgment, and he's going to come back and review those judgments in the following chapters. Let's just notice in 15:1, the message concerning Moab, because in the night Ar of Moab was laid waste, was silenced, because in the night Kir of Moab was laid waste, was silenced. And then the rest of the chapter is the judgment on Moab. Chapter 16, send a lamb to the ruler of the land of Selah, to the wilderness, to the mountain of the daughter of Zion, and it shall be like a wandering bird, a nest thrown out. So are the daughters of Moab, so this is continuing at the fords of Arnon, continuing judgment of Moab. Chapter 17 and verse 1, the message concerning Damascus. It says, it has a little bit different word. It is still Damascus in the new ISR. See, Damascus ceases to be a city and shall become a heap of ruins. The cities of Aroer are forsaken. They are for flocks which shall lie down. Chapter 18 and verse 1. Woe to the land shadowed with whirring wings, which is beyond the rivers of Cush. Chapter 19 and verse 1. The message concerning Mitzrayim. And so on. And so we go forward from here, and we're just looking at time and again at the judgments against the nations that Yahweh used. Yeah, I mean, we have to credit that Yahweh did use them, but then Yahweh comes back and punishes them. Chapter 21, verse 1. The message concerning the wilderness of the sea. As whirlwinds in the south sweep on, so it becomes from the wilderness, from an awesome land. And it's not pleasant if you read the judgments. Chapter 22 and verse 1, the message concerning the valley of visions. What troubles you now that you have all gone to the housetops? So that, there's judgment right there. chapter 23 in verse 1, the message concerning Or. Howl, you ships of Tarshish, for it has been destroyed without house, without harbor, from the land of Kittim. It has been revealed to them. So there's judgment. A message too, a message too, a message too. Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24. The disciples of Yahshua asked him, and that's why we read chapter 12 and 14 to show you where is this judgment coming on these nations. It's when Yahweh returns Israel to favor. When Yahweh sets up Israel, then he's going to judge these nations. And we're going to see that. We read about this here in Matthew, and we read about it in Revelation. In Matthew 24, the disciples asked Yeshua, when would this be? This is the time. The time of his coming is when Yahweh is going to return Israel. So that's the time frame of this judgment. And in verse 21 of Matthew 24, we read, for then, and that's the time when the disciples said, when will these things be? It's when Yahweh returns Israel, has Israel return to him, and puts his judgment on these other nations. Then there shall be a great distress, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, and no, nor ever shall be. In verse 22, and if those days were not shortened, and there's one of the parallel scriptures that said not shortened, there would nobody be saved alive. Nobody be saved alive. No flesh would be saved, but for the sake of the chosen one, those days should be shortened. And in verse 29, and immediately after the distress of those days, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. And verse 30, and then the sign of the Son of Man shall appear in the heaven. Then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Adam coming on the clouds of the heaven with power and much esteem. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Who is chosen ones? Well, the first fruits, and then Israel, because Ezekiel 37 is going to come in here. The resurrection of the dry bones. In Revelation 6, John saw the unfolding of Yeshua's words in Matthew 24 in the form of a vision from Yeshua. Yeshua was the one who was giving him this vision. And in Revelation chapter 6, he sees this unfolding in the four horsemen, which we have talked about many times, and we'll be talking about again very soon. But let's go back to Isaiah. Back in Isaiah, in the context of Yahweh executing his judgment upon these people, we come to chapter 24. Chapter 24. Back up to, I think maybe we got a little bit beyond that, but chapter 24, and reading from verse 1 to 23, which is the whole chapter, chapter 24. Now, some people will read this, and they don't understand the context, and they don't read it carefully. See, Yahweh is making the earth empty. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? Remember the guy who came a few years ago and had his little bottles on the table? Because he misreads this. The earth is empty. Now, if that's all you read, what would you think the earth would look like? Barren and empty. But you got to read the whole thing. Making it waste. So you'd think the earth was just totally annihilated and there's nobody here. And shall overturn its surface and shall scatter abroad its inhabitants. Wait a minute. If it's empty, how can there be any inhabitants to scatter? So, you know, there's something wrong with people who have to look at everything literally because they can't explain the discrepancies, because that's a discrepancy. If it's totally empty, how are there any inhabitants to scatter? This was written in Hebrew, and, you know, the meaning is that it's almost empty, and that the few men left, which is going to say a little bit down in verse 6, it's going to say few men left. Well, wait a minute. How can it be empty if there are a few men left? How can it be empty if they're scattering the few men left, inhabitants? So it doesn't mean totally empty. It just doesn't mean that, obviously. But this is the way it gets because of the judgment that Yahweh is going to bring on these nations. So, yes, we're here to rehearse the quiet time, Israel returning to Yahweh, the presence of Yahshua, his return, his resurrection of the first. But listen, this is some stuff that has to happen to get to that. To get to that. It shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with the female servant, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller. Wait a minute, how can there be all these people if it's empty? As with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the creditor, so with the debtor. And then here we go again. The earth is completely emptied. Is it? And utterly plundered, for Yahweh has spoken this word. The earth shall mourn. The earth shall mourn. Well, that could be metaphorical because it could mean, well, the ball of property is sad. I guess. I don't know how they explained that. Maybe that guy was just trying to explain that with his little bottles. The earth shall mourn and wither. The world shall languish and wither. The haughty people that aren't here anymore of the earth shall languish. For the earth has been defiled under its inhabitants because they have transgressed the Torah, changed the law, the Kok. So this law is not the Torah, it's the Kokim. Broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore, a curse shall consume the earth. You know, I have pictures of the earth being cast into a black hole, don't you? Yes, Joshua.
So the earth is empty of Yahweh's word.
Good. Tov. He understands. It is. That's right. Therefore, a curse, and when it's empty of Yahweh's word, a curse shall consume the earth, but it's not going to be throwing the earth into a black hole. And those who dwell in it shall be punished. I thought there wasn't anybody left. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth shall be burned, and few men shall be left. It doesn't say no man shall be left. It says few, doesn't it? Yahweh likes that few, doesn't he? That's one of Yahweh's favorite words is few. The new wine shall fail, the vine shall languish, all those glad at heart shall sigh. The joy of the tambourine shall cease, the noise of those who rejoice shall end, the joy of the lyre shall cease. No more do they drink wine with a song. Strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The deserted city shall be broken down, every house shall be shut, no one enters. It sounds like Joel, doesn't it? There is, and we know that Joel is talking about this time of the tribulation. There is a crying for wine in the streets. All joy shall be darkened. The gladness of the earth shall be gone. The city is left in ruins, and the gate is stricken with destruction. For thus it is to be in the midst of the earth among the peoples, like the shaking of an olive tree, like the gleaning of grapes when the grape harvest is done. They lift up their voice. They sing of the excellency of Yahweh. They shall cry aloud from the sea. Therefore praise Yahweh in the east, in the name of Yahweh Elohim of Israel, in the coastlands of the sea. From the ends of the earth we shall hear the songs, splendor to the righteous one. But I say, I waste away, woe to me. The treacherous betray with treachery, the treacherous betray. Fear and the pit and the snare are upon you, O inhabitant of the earth. And it shall be that he who flees from the noise of the fear fear falls into the pit, and he who comes up from the midst of the pit is caught in the snare. For the windows from on high shall be opened, and the foundations of the earth shall be shaken. The earth shall be utterly broken. The earth shall be completely shattered. The earth shall be fiercely shaken. Well, why do you need all of those? This is poetic. The earth shall stagger like a drunkard, and it shall totter like a hut, and its transgression shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again. And in that day it shall be that Yahweh punishes on high the host of exalted ones, and on the earth of the sovereigns of the earth. And they shall be gathered together as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and shall be shut up in the prison, and shall be punished after many days. And the moon shall blush. In other words, it'll turn to blood. And the sun shall be ashamed, for Yahweh of hosts shall reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before his elders in the esteem. And so we just had 4 of those blood moons, and so Yahweh should be reigning from Mount Zion. That wasn't the kind of moon he was talking about, was it? Nope. So, okay. Zechariah chapter 14. Zechariah chapter 14. I think we read this chapter the other day as well. Zechariah 14. In verse 1, see, a day shall come for Yahweh, and your spoil shall be divided in your midst. And I shall gather all the Gentiles to battle against Jerusalem, and the city shall be taken, and the houses plundered. Same thing we just read, didn't we? I mean, in the case of Isaiah, he didn't say anything about the houses being plundered. But the imagery was there. You could see that same thing. You could see Joel there. Half of the city shall go into exile. Talked about exile in Isaiah. The remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. And Yahweh shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day, Yahshua's feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives. So it wasn't empty of the Mount of Olives, and it wasn't empty of the few men left. And the Mount of Olives shall split in two, to the east and to the west, a very great valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. And then I think we read the rest of that. And we go on, and when we read in there, we see that the Feast of Tabernacles is going to be being kept. And if they don't come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, they don't have any rain. And then if they still don't come up and keep the Feast of Tabernacles, then what happens? Who remembers the next thing that happens? What's the next word? What do they get? Remember that, Joshua? What is it?
There will be no rain.
Yeah, and then when there's no rain and they still don't come up, then what happens?
Yahweh will be really mad.
Yeah, he will. And what happens when Yahweh gets really mad? They get a plague, don't they? Isn't that what it says? Then the plague in verse 18. On them is the plague with which Yahweh plagues the nations who do not come up to observe the Feast of Booths, Feast of Sukkot. Now, the last chapters of Ezekiel also chronicle this time, especially from chapter 30 of Ezekiel and verse 1, where it says, and the word of Yahweh, Ezekiel 30 and verse 1, the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy and say, Thus says the Master Yahweh, howl, woe to the day. So before this day comes, there's got to be a day of howling and woe. It's the judgment. First of all, Satan's wrath, and then the judgment of Yahweh has got to come on the earth before this festival can be fulfilled in the way we are here to rehearse it. Woe to the day, for the day is near. Even the day of Yahweh is near. It is a day of clouds, the time of the nations. Well, isn't it interesting that here we had this scripture in here about the day of clouds, and we got the day of clouds. Now, I will say this. When I was coming over to services, though, I did see some blue sky. Did you see it? Because she's been seeing blue sky all day. I told her she was seeing a silver lining. But there were blue clouds, or blue sky. There was blue sky peeking through the clouds. I think it's gone now. It looks kind of darkish out there. But anyway, it's a day of clouds before you have the light of the presence of Yahshua, Yahweh Yahshua. through the resurrections of the dry bones in chapter 37 of Ezekiel, and through all the instructions of the restoration of the hekel and the sacrificial service, you've got the words that celebrate or that tell us about what this festival that we're here rehearsing is going to do. So it's fitting and proper that we should obey the words of Yahweh and do the little bit of work that seems like work to us, to do what Yahweh says to do on the first day, which we did. Revelation chapter 20. Revelation chapter 20. So the day that really pictures the judgment is trumpets, because that's when the that we talked about that on the day of trumpets when they were blowing the shofar, shofarim, shofarot. Is it ot or im? It's ot, isn't it? Shofarot, the shofars. When they were blowing those, we talked about that being a sound of Yahweh's judgment, or a symbol, or an announcement of Yahweh's judgment. In Revelation chapter 20, so we have to have the judgment before we get to this day, and Isaiah has it all. Isaiah is talking about the feast, all the fall feasts and what they picture, the plan that's being worked out, the judgment of Yahweh, the restoration, the coming of the Son of Yahweh back, and the setting up of his government. And then our part in it, and we have to look forward to our part in it, is pictured here in Revelation 20 and verse 6. Blessed and kadosh is the one having part in the first resurrection. Because before you get to that Ezekiel 37 resurrection, you've got to have somebody who's going to manage and train and teach those people. Blessed and kadosh is the one having part in the first resurrection. The second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Shall reign with him 1,000 years. So what is a priest? You know, a priest, Moses was called a priest and a king, a priest king, because he stood for the people to Yahweh. That's what they wanted. So when that first resurrection comes about, before all those people are going to come up and say, "Oh, I'm not in heaven like I thought I was going to be when I died." He's going to set these first fruits, the first resurrection people, they will be his sons, and they will be spiritual priests to those people, and they will be the ones who will explain to them that their hope isn't lost. Yes, what they hoped for is lost, because that's not what was promised. And they will explain the promise. All right. Isaiah chapter 65. Isaiah 65. Is that Chuck? Yep, that's Chuck Baldwin. All right, Isaiah 65 and beginning in verse 17. Isaiah 65 and verse 17. So you got the resurrection, the first resurrection, spirit beings who are going to be priests and kings to that next resurrection of the dry bones in Ezekiel 37. Isaiah 65 and verse 17. For look, Yahweh says, I am creating renewed heavens and a renewed earth. Do you see what happened back there in Isaiah 24? Why we need a renewed heaven and a renewed earth? Because he said it's going to be empty. He didn't mean totally empty, even though it says completely. It doesn't mean that in the Hebrew, because obviously a few men were left. But the earth reels, the earth is destroyed. Mankind, we're doing a good job of that right now, so we're leading up to that. But that's why we have to have a renewed heavens and a renewed earth. And the former shall not be remembered, nor come to heart. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For look, I create Jerusalem, a rejoicing, and her people, a joy. And I shall rejoice in Jerusalem, and shall joy in my people. And let the voice of weeping no more be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. No more is an infant from there going to live a few days, nor an old man who does not complete his days, for the youth dies 100 years old. Now that doesn't mean, like when I was taught 50 years ago, that the white throne judgment period, this has nothing to do with the white throne judgment period. This is not the last day. This is the millennium. This is the Sukkot. This is Sukkot. It simply means that the lifespan is going to be at least 100 years. So if your children were born at the beginning of the millennium, they're going to live to be 100 years old. And there's going to be a messenger, that's going to keep them out of mischief to bring them up to that. Maybe it might be you. Wouldn't that be nice? So it's not the lifespan. It's the minimum during the millennium. And it says the sinner being 100 years old shall be lightly esteemed. So if somebody lives 100 years and they still haven't got it, that's not tov. That won't be tov. They will be lightly esteemed. And you know what that means? That's not tov. It's not tov. And they shall build houses and inhabit them. These are the people who are in that resurrection. Think of all of the infants that died in Israel that are going to be there, be resurrected in that resurrection. They're going to grow up and build houses. I mean, you know how sad it was? Your little sister, Kim, died when she was, 18 months old or something like that. And, you're going to have to help her along because you got to help mom and dad first. And those of you who have lost, who have lost infants or know of infants, young people who died before the time, oh, what a time. What a time that's going to be. And they'll live to be at least 100 years old. And they should get it by then. It's amazing that Yahweh will give us, will give them 100 years, isn't it? That shows you, that it's not just poured into you. They shall build houses and inhabit them and plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And there's not going to be any war. Swords are going to be beaten into plowshares. And, it's going to be a time of plenty. That's why we have a feast of plenty at the Feast of Sukkot. They shall not build and another inhabit, because there's not going to be any war allowed. They shall not plant and another eat. For the days of my people are going to be as the days of a tree, and my chosen ones outlive the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth children for trouble, for they are the seed of the blessed of Yahweh, and their offspring with them. And it shall be that before they call, I answer. And while they are still speaking, I hear. Wolf and lamb feed together. A lion eats straw as an ox. A repeat from Isaiah chapter 11. And dust is the snake's food. They shall do no evil, nor destroy in all my Kadosh mountain, said Yahweh. So if you go back and compare that to chapter 11, verses 6 and 7, this is the culmination. Yahweh tells you it's going to happen, then he gives you all the things that are going to happen in between, and all the judgments that are going to come on the nations. But yes, this is the ultimate. And there are no shortage of scriptures, as you see. We got the whole book of Isaiah that we can study to solidify this part of the plan of Yahweh. Isaiah, Ezekiel has it. Revelation has it. Joel has some. So, the plan of Yahweh is a wonderful plan. In this time that we're here to spend together, to fellowship, don't leave it out of your fellowship, out of your prayers, and out of your study, because it's a wonderful time to rehearse. May Yahweh bless you and guard you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and give you his favor. May Yahweh lift up his countenance over you and give you his peace. Yivarekeka Yahweh va'ishmereka. Ya'er Yahweh panavaleka vikaneka. Yasa Yahweh panavaleka v'yasem l'ka shalom. You thought I forgot it, didn't you?